Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan Pugh, and this is Writing Quest. Today we have Emma Elias. She is with us from Australia, and so she's a writer based in Australia. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of
Very
course.
excited for this chat.
Yeah. So, why don't you just give us some brief background about yourself and how you got into writing, your kind of whole journey?
Yep, so I'm a Sydney-based writer. So far I've had a number of things published in anthologies, literary magazines. They're more short stories and poems, but I'm mainly a novelist, or I want to be a novelist, so I'm working on a novel. I guess I got into writing. It's probably going to sound cliche, but I've been writing for literally as long as I can remember, as long as I could hold a pen. As a kid, I would like steal I have a lot of older siblings. I would steal their like their school exercise books and use the lines to like write my silly little stories. And then in what we call it primary school, I think for you, I think it's elementary school. I don't know. When
Elementary
I was
school.
elementary school, I was like 11, 12. I would write all of these movie scripts, and my friends would come over in the holidays and would make these like productions that we thought were amazing. But, anyway. And then when I got into high school, which is like year seven, I don't know,
Yeah.
13,
We do.
14.
We have elementary school, middle school is so, and then high school. So, high school is like 14 to 18.
So yeah, so maybe around middle school.
Yeah.
Yep. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's when I was like, you know what, I'm going to write novels, and I wrote my first novel series in high school, and it wasn't very good, but I wrote. I'm proud that I committed to it, and but I was always like, when I'm older, I'm going to be a writer. When I'm older, I'm going to be a writer, and then I left school. Um, did uni, that sort of thing, and now I'm working full time, and I kind of had that realization. I'm like, oh, I'm older now. This is when I take now I take
Yeah.
this very seriously, and I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah, for sure. It's so funny when you get older and then you realize, like, I mean, you end up with all the pressures of life, but then you also realize, like, if I want to do this thing, I can just go do it now.
Yeah, this is it. This is the time. This is older.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
So you wrote a series when you were younger. So do you still have that? Do you like, you know, anything? Are you going to do anything with it ever?
No, I still have it. I keep it very it's very precious to me, of course.
Hmm.
And I read it when I'm feeling cocky.
Sure.
Just to remind myself to humble myself a little, a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah, I have a lot of love and a lot of affection for it, but it's it. I'm very. It was helpful to me, like learning the discipline and the commitment to writing, and also
Sure.
figuring out my writing style. But I definitely wouldn't let anyone read it ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I have my first manuscript I ever finished is back on my bookshelf and same thing. Like I let my brother read it and he just was like, this is bad. I was like, I know it is. That the idea is solid, but everything else is no good.
Yeah, yeah. But I think you need to have your first writing experience. It's part of it. It's how you learn
Yeah,
and develop as a writer, I think.
for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. So that's all awesome. So what do you as far as let's talk a little bit about I haven't really talked to anyone yet about that whole publishing, poems and short stories and anthologies and things. How'd you kind of get into that and how do you maybe for the writer listening, how do you find stuff like that to submit things to?
Well, it's super interesting because I started by submitting all these short. So I have all of these short stories and poems. I just write them because I don't know. I'll have a inspiration. This isn't big enough to be a novel, but I'll write it out anyway. I also find writing shorter things is a good way for me to keep momentum, especially because
Mhm.
life is super busy, and sometimes I don't have the brain space to lock into my work in progress, my novel, but I still want to keep that momentum and that practice going. So I have all of these stories, and I mean poems. I write when I have big feelings, um, but
Perfect.
yeah. So I have them. So I was like, I'll start submitting, on Submittable. That's where I started finding things, and now I'll branch into how I find things now. But I started looking for things unsubmittable. And then, lots and lots of rejections at the beginning, like just constant stream of rejections. And then I saw a call for a piece on inspiration. And I was like, I'm gonna try write something specifically for the theme. Like I would just send stuff that I had, and I'm like, I'm gonna write something for this. But the thing is, I wasn't feeling very inspired in that moment, so I just started writing about what I was doing in that moment, which was looking for inspiration, and then it turned into this whole piece about being a writer who's writing no one reads, to
Mm.
being an unpublished writer, and how it's the whole thing is like Emma was a writer, and that is what she did because she wrote writer, like she thought writer thoughts, she spoke writer speech. She was a writer
Yeah.
right to her core. And then I wrote that, sent it, forgot about it because it was just I was just in a frenzy of writing and submitting. um and then I remember I had this whole, like, a few weeks later, was having this whole existential crisis, and I was like, I'm going to start using a pseudonym. I'm not going to publish under my real name because that's embarrassing. And
Mhm.
I made this whole pseudonym and all this, and I was like, okay, this is what is that the right pen name anyway?
Yeah.
Pen name, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm gonna start publishing under this name. And then that day, I got accepted. This piece, a writer got accepted, and it had my name all through it because it was Emma was a writer, blah blah blah, and it was just kind of beautifully poetic that my first piece published was about being an unpublished writer, and
Yeah.
my name all the way through it. So I was like, okay, it looks like I am publishing as me. So that was my first published work, and so I still look unsubmittable. But now I think as I grow on, like as I'm more active on Instagram, because I since then have been trying to build that platform, because that's how I think now that's how you kind of make a name for yourself, and that's part of the industry now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I've now you see a lot of opportunities through that, a lot of submission calls. So I just try to jump on as many submission calls as I can, and obviously there are still lots of rejections, but I find as the momentum goes, I start figuring out what works and just getting to know different magazines and publishing companies as well, and like getting to know what they're looking for helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you that's really smart because you talk about getting a lot of rejections and stuff, but like you got to meet people. So like the more you're submitting, the more you're talking to people. Like you eventually, it's even like starting this podcast. Like I've started meeting all these people, and you kind of jump into this whole community of writers and stuff. And that you writers, I think, tend to write in their own little bubble, and they don't really invite anyone in, and they just kind of but it's like the more people you meet, that's how you start getting out there. So even though you get a lot of rejections, you then eventually you get that one that gets accepted, and then you get the next one, and then
Exactly. And you can't let yourself be discouraged. In fact, like I've been rejected from certain literary magazines only to submit something the next issue and get that accepted,
Mhm.
because you learn, right? And you
Yeah.
learn what they want, and you make connections, and yeah. And it's the writing community is great. They're all like everyone shares opportunities, which I find beautiful.
Yeah, and also it could even be that it wasn't even that they disliked it. It's just not what they were looking for. So that's like any creative field. Like it's not necessarily that that creativity is bad or whatever. It's just not what's needed at the time. And
Yeah.
so you just got to give your like. There's so many factors that it's hard to quantify. What's really totally why they might be rejecting it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think we get and I was definitely like this in the beginning. Like you take a rejection and you just like retreat back into your little corner, and you're like, oh no, I'm never going to share my writing again, because it's very vulnerable. Like yeah, letting people read your work is very. I find it so stressful. I cannot have someone read what I've written in front of me. I need to leave the house. Like I need to be somewhere very far away. But yeah, it's not always, yeah, we it's learning not to take it as a hit to your identity as a writer and just be like, okay.
Yeah, I think so. The thing I struggle with more, so I spent many years, I still am, but I spent many years as a musician. So I got really used to like criticism on your creative work. So that part doesn't bug me so much about even sharing writing. What I find really trips me up is, if I don't even know how to explain this, of like, so I the book that I'm writing right now, it's like I have all these characters in my head and I know them really well. And it feels very like intimate because they're in my brain and I'm writing them. And so I feel weird about like, it's not about the criticism of the creativity. It's like I'm sharing like a really close part of me with someone,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, does that make sense?
Yeah, writing is so vulnerable. It's so vulnerable. Yeah, and that's what makes it so scary, especially if it's like giving your child. I don't know. This like it's like my characters are my children, and it's
Yeah.
like putting. You don't want to like. Do I trust you with these people that are so like dear to me? And then
Well, yeah, or even people being like, I can't believe this came out of that person's head. Like, are this
yeah,
really what they're thinking about?
yeah,
Like it's like it's like
yeah.
an insight into your mind or something. It's just that trips me up more.
Like I'd rather 100 strangers read it than like one person I know.
Yeah,
Just for some reason, it makes a difference. I don't know.
yeah, absolutely. So if we could talk about, so you are writing a novel currently.
Yes.
So before we get into maybe what that might be about, how do you feel about the differences between writing things for short stories versus a novel? Like, are there any kind of, obviously there's a big difference in length, of course, but as
Mm.
far as plotting, story structure, how you go about things, what's kind of some differences there?
Well, in general, I'm a bit of a pantser. I'm not a plotter. Um, so I think which works easier with short stories because there's not as much to plot. And generally with short stories, I think my system is you start kind you don't start at the start of a story. You start right in the action and you like it's quite a snippet. Um, which is which I find quite um I'm not going to say I don't want to say easy, but like it comes quite naturally because part of my pantser brain is that I'll think of a scene and I need to write it straight away, even if it's for like a book I'm going to write 10 years in because I've got my checklist of the books I'm going to write. You know what I mean? I've got like my 20
Sure.
book plan or whatever.
Yeah.
If I think of a scene, I need to write it out properly straight away and then put it to the side for that. Which works nicely for writing short stories because I'll have a quick inspiration. I can sit down. I find trains, I don't know, I sit down on a train and I just smash out a poem or a story. Like that's I don't know, I just really lock in on public transport. So it's kind of, and then I can just edit through that. But that same process means writing a novel takes me so long
Yeah.
because I don't have that sort of I'm trying now because I'm really trying to lock in and finish this novel. I'm tried plotting it out better now, but that's after years of pantsing my way through this one and like
Hmm.
random scenes and like putting them together. But I think with short stories you can afford to just be like I have this cool scene, I'm going to write it and then you can edit it and make it work in a bigger context, you know? Um but yeah. So
Yeah, and I think short stories are I think for me it's like the longer something is, the more you might want to think about doing at least a little bit of outlining. So like,
yes.
yeah, because I've have a few short stories that I've kind of written or have little ideas about, and it's like, just I most of the time it's kind of in the world that I'm already writing my books in, so I just kind of think of like, oh, this would be a cool scene, and I just kind of write it down,
Yeah.
mostly to not forget it, and maybe I'll use it in something. But it's definitely easier to pants those because you kind of like the whole thing comes to you at one time. At least it does for me,
Yeah.
where I'm just
Yeah.
like I kind of see this whole thing from beginning to end
Yeah.
already, and so you're just kind of transcribing it almost. Whereas writing a book, like I'm working through mine, and you just have to keep going. Like it's just this kind of a it's a relentless kind of just keep marching forward, word by
Yeah,
word.
and plot holes and outline like character development and all this. Whereas in a short story, you can get like a nice little burst of
Mhm,
this, even if in your head it is a bigger grand scheme, but it's just like a quick burst of something.
mhm.
Yeah. Whereas with novels, there's so much room. There's just so many more things you need to be pedantic about when writing a novel. There's so many more things to look at.
Yeah. You mentioned you have a long list of ideas. Do you find that sometimes the amount of ideas you have kind of get in the way of progress because you kind of want to? What I do is I kind of do that where I'm like, I have all these ideas and then I get motivated on one that I really shouldn't work on because I'm
Yeah.
trying to finish the other one. So do you find that to be a struggle or do you have a kind of a way to work through that stuff?
So I think so this particular work in progress has taken me years, and precisely because I would get distracted with my million other projects. Um,
Mhm.
I have I handwrite all my first drafts, and when I have new ideas, I always handwrite. It's just so I've got like a of notebooks, which is just overflowing constantly. Um,
Yeah.
but I think this year, I've really I'm trying to be very disciplined and prioritizing. I'm finishing this book. I'm giving myself a deadline. And the other things, if I have good ideas for them, because ideas will still pop up and I'll still think about them, I'll I'll jot it down quickly and put it away. But I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm not going to write a whole chapter. I'm not going to, start world building and doing all of the fun things for that. I need to really focus on this one because this is I want this finished by the end of this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you definitely have to do it's kind of like when you think of ideas for tasks, like you still have to go write the task down so you don't forget it because
Yeah.
otherwise you'll just be trying to remember it while you're trying to do the other thing. So, but then it's like you got to make sure to pull yourself away and be like, okay, I wrote down the idea, I kind of started it, so it's over there, but
Yeah.
then I got to pull away.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, do you know what I find those voice recordings? I have
Hmm.
so many like ridiculous voice recordings to myself. I'll like wake up in the middle of the night and like have a 5 minute little podcast to myself. And then
Yeah,
it's like, okay, the idea exists. I can come back to it. Yeah, move on.
yeah. Yeah, I use like my notes app. I've got a bunch of ideas in there, and I've got a document that like a pages Apple Pages document that's
Yeah.
just like everything, you know. So that's fun. So let's talk about the book you are writing. So obviously, you don't want to give away too much, but what is it? What kind of genre is it? Like, can you give us a little bit of information about it?
Yeah, for sure. So it's so funny. Do you ever get that like when someone asks you what's your book about, you suddenly go, "Oh, I can talk about that." It's like
Yeah,
suddenly like
yeah.
really, ooh.
You're like, what are
Um,
you doing? I can't say anything. Yeah.
yeah. No, but so it's a Victorian steampunk. I think
Oh,
it's
that's cool.
yeah. I love steampunk. Feel like I don't read much steampunk. I find it hard to actually find books that are the steampunk genre. But yeah, so
Yeah.
Victorian steampunk. Um, I'm not. I think it's more like YA to adult fiction, but it's super the writing styles that I kind of take inspiration from are like Lemony Snicket or like Neil Gaiman. I like that kind of like narrator voice. Like I feel like my narrator is their own character. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so it's that sort of writing style. But I mean, I can tell you a little bit about the plot because I've been trying to promote it a lot on my Instagram. But so it's basically Victorian steampunk, and I've got all of the nursery rhyme characters in this Victorian setting. And I don't know if it sounds silly, but it's basically the plot follows the son of Humpty Dumpty, who's not an egg. He's not an egg in my
Mhm.
story.
Okay.
Trying to find out what happened to his dad. So it's this whole like kind of bit of mystery. You've got all your nursery rhyme characters in there. It's yeah,
Yeah.
and
That's
steampunk, so
super
it's a bit
fun.
quirky. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. No, I love hearing about like taking familiar things, putting them in something super unusual. and then you then can apply like a mystery genre or something that's like totally different. Like I just think that's super cool. So it sounds awesome.
Thank you. I'm having so much fun with it. I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think uh, I'm obviously not writing this, so you can tell me what you think, but it sounds like if it sounds like a lot of fun to take something that you like or is very familiar and do something crazy with it. You know,
Yeah.
like I'm a fan of Star Wars. So it's like, what if I took Star Wars characters and put them in like, Middle Earth or something
Yeah,
like that?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah,
So
exactly. And I love so fairy tales, nursery rhymes, that sort of thing. I absolutely love love them. I as a teenager, I would just read as many fairy tale retellings as were being published, and I just like storytelling tradition. I find it so. I always would say if I ever do a PhD, it'll be on fairy tales and how
mhm.
that storytelling tradition has developed through now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I makes sense that my first novel that I'm trying to get out um, has something to do with that sort of folklore tradition.
Yeah. That's cool. I just started reading Tress of the Emerald Sea, the one of Brandon Sanderson's secret projects.
Yeah,
And
Brandon
it's kind of
Sanderson.
like that. It's like a narrator, like, or I think the one character that's part of the Cosmere like kind of narrates it. And it's cool. I like that writing style a lot.
So Brandon Sanderson is another one who I really yeah, his writing style is a big inspiration for me. I love
Yeah.
Brandon Sanderson and I love his writing style.
Yeah. Same. He Everything about what he is doing right now, whether you like his books or not, what he's doing just as an author and for his author business is so inspiring.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just incredible.
Yeah, he's a legend and I will always recommend a Brandon Sanderson. I have no qualms with ever lending out my Brandon Sandersons. It's always a safe recommendation. He's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, well, and actually, so I'm kind of behind on him. I haven't read this. I'm just now getting into the secret projects. But I'm kind of now like someone came into the bookstore that we talked about earlier that we started, and I had some Brandon Sanderson there, and they were asking where to start, and I'm kind of feeling like Tress is actually not a bad place because it's not hyper connected. It's in there, but it's of a standalone thing. It's a very easy read. Like it's not one of the big, Stormlight Archive books. I think it's a good entry point.
Exactly. Literally, like the other week, my friend was like, "I want to start reading fantasy. Where do I start?" And I was like, I wanted to give her Mistborn, but then I was like, wait, actually, we'll start you with a little standalone. And she started with Tress of the Emerald Sea, and like she literally messaged me like a week later, like, I'm done. I need more Brandon Sanderson. I want more from this author. And I'm like, yes, see, it's a good way to start on the fantasy genre, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So, what are some of your other influences? Like, if you go back to being in school or whatever, like, what were the things that you read or saw or watched or whatever that were your big influences?
So I look, my first novel is steampunk, but I'm a big fantasy, you know, like I love fantasy. I love dragons. Um, and so I definitely started off with Harry Potter. I think that
Sure.
start off with Harry Potter, um, and Lord of the Rings. Again, I have a lot of older siblings, so I would watch whatever they will watch. So I'd be like 6 years old watching Lord of the Rings, which
Hmm.
I mean is awesome. Um,
Yeah.
and Series of Unfortunate Events I loved that series in primary school. Mysterious Benedict Society. Again, a lot of the same sort of um, narrate narrator voice. I really love description
Hmm.
and just like a quirky narrator who sounds like they're speaking to you. I really like that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Um, and then Percy Jackson, and I think Percy Jackson was a big influence on that first series I wrote in high school.
Yeah.
I started writing that when I was like 12. So I think I think I was basically trying to copy Percy Jackson just with a different concept, but the whole like vibe and style which I loved reading, but I don't think is my writing style.
Yeah.
Reflecting back, I'm like, but I think when you're first starting out, especially when you're that young, you just sort of copy whatever you're obsessed with at the time a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I was a massive reader
Yeah.
all through school.
Um, I made me think. Have you heard of the Nicholas Flamel series?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yep,
it's a little bit of a not an underdog. It's like slightly under the radar.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if I ever finished it. I read like the first 4 when they were coming out, and then it kind of fell off my radar. But I remember reading that. It's kind of the same thing where it's like a bunch of familiar things that you know about, but in a different context. And that one, I thought that was a great series.
It's just exciting. Like those things are like yeah, seeing those familiar concepts. It's I love those moments when you're like when something clicks and you realize what they're referencing. Like I love all those subtle little um
Hmm.
you know, subtle little links. And it's so exciting to read, I think, because you're just like, "Oh, they're talking about the like, you know, it's just it gets you kind of pumped." So I love that
Yeah,
feeling and I want to translate that feeling.
yeah, yeah. I always, so I'm 35, and so when I was growing up, when I was about 10, that was when like the Lord of the Rings movies came out, all the X Men movies came out, uh, the Star Wars prequels, Pokemon started, like all of
Amazing.
that hit just within that like 3 or 4 years. So I was basically doomed from the beginning.
It's amazing.
So all of that stuff like really influenced me. And one of the things, Tolkien obviously was a big influence. And I just really appreciated like how thoughtful the storytelling is. Like some people might say it's slow now or there's too much of this or too much of that, but like everything was done with intention. And that was something that actually really stuck out to me. And then I would watch so when the movies came out, they came out with all they like each movie had like 12 hours of extras or something. So I would watch all like how they made the movies and stuff, and then just the attention to detail in that. So like for me, that was something that really impressed on me of like intentional storytelling. Like everything in the story is very intentional. And so that's something that I really am trying to like that's part of why it's taking me so long to write mine is because I really want like I want the details to matter, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Tolkien is the king of that. In fact, like, I mean, there's a reason people kind of call him the father of fantasy, is because
Mhm.
he is the king of. I mean, world building in itself was creating a whole new world was quite new for the genre at the time. Like he sort of, we had other fantasies, but a lot of the time it was our main characters going to another world and then coming back, like Narnia. They go to Narnia and then they come back,
Yeah.
or even like Gulliver's Travels. They go and then they come back. Like it's that sort of
Mhm.
fantasy. It's like people from our world going out, but then having characters living and existing and having this whole world that makes sense and that is
Mhm.
actually, that actually works as a society was was really new. I think he was one of the first, definitely one of the first people to do that. I did a whole assessment on it at uni, but I kind of can't remember anymore. But he was one of the first writers to do that, which yeah, it's amazing. The detail is so impressive and so it makes Middle Earth feel so real.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is, so you look at someone like Brandon Sanderson, and he's like cranking out novels, like just I can't even keep up with it all,
Mm.
and which is great, and he's writing great novel, like not to discount what he's doing, but then also to look at someone like Tolkien, who pretty much spent his whole life writing Lord of the Rings or things around the Lord of the Rings, and that's pretty much what he wrote. He wrote a couple. I think there's a few other little things here and there, but like he pretty much like he wrote The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, and 3 other books. Like that's his whole legacy. Yet here we are, like almost a what 80, 90 years later, everyone's still all about it. So I think That's definitely something I always think about, like, if you're feeling that pressure of, "I gotta get this done. I gotta publish it. I gotta," like, you do that a lot when you're younger too. Like, I remember being in my 20 or late teens and 20s being like, "Well, if I don't do it now,
Yeah.
I'll never do it," you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, when actually that's a good point. I've never thought about how he's because he has probably definitely one of the biggest legacies in terms of his impact on genre and just I mean,
He
his
basically
books are
wrote
just
5
timeless.
books, you
Yeah,
know?
and exactly, yeah. And his books are just so like they're still the best fantasy books. I mean, I don't think that's that controversial or cool. Like Lord of the
I
Rings are
don't
the
think so.
best fantasy.
It
Yeah.
is to me, so you're good
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. No one's gonna come after me.
Yeah. No, everyone on this channel is very aware that I am a big Tolkien fan. So,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Good, good.
So, I liked what you said. You said this a little bit ago. You kinda mentioned that you really like description,
Hmm.
and so it made me think about I love world building, so, like, readings again, I like Tolkien, so reading a long passage of world building or, like, kind of an info dump of world building does not bug me. Like, I'm all about it, you know? So, what would you say about, like, you read a book about writing or you see stuff online or videos and stuff, and everyone's got all these rules of how to keep your pacing and do all this stuff and how much description you should have or whatever. What are your thoughts on that? I'm kind of one of like, obviously there are rules to writing, but most of them can be broken, I think.
The same. I am the same. I can't I've tried reading those writing books on writing and I know they do have a lot of credit in them, I'm sure, and I know they really, really do help some writers. Um, but I find I prefer to just I think your writing voice and your writing style, it's it's really quite natural and organic. I think it comes from figuring out what works and what doesn't. But that's also just how I am as a learner as well. I'm s- I don't know, not to sound like really like I don't do rules, but like I can't follow a recipe, for example. If I'm cooking, I can't follow a recipe. And if
Mhm.
if I'm if I'm studying, I need to make my own notes. I can't just copy from the slides. I need to do it in a way that I understand. And I think I'm the same with writing. I can't follow like this formula and this format and these boxes because it's just not how the ideas come for me. Um,
Mm.
so I find and the other thing is like I love description, right? I There are readers who will sit and read 3 pages about a tree. There are lots who won't, but there are some who will and who will enjoy it.
Mm.
And I suppose it's just as writers we need to figure out why we're doing this. Is it because we want I don't know, we want to be the next, book talk like viral whatever that, gonna be flying off the shelves, or is it because this is our craft and this is I want to write something that's just authentically my writing voice? And yeah, I think writing is a lot more personal than that. So I think for me, I'd rather write something that I have put my whole heart into and really made it my own and my own style and my own voice than trying to follow these like checker boxes. But
Yeah.
that's how I write personally.
Yeah, it's that kind of Venn diagram of like being yourself and writing something good, but also like something that people will read. Like there's kind of
Yeah.
like but I would always lean more towards like, you can't just necessarily write the thing that you want to write, but it still has to be good though. So
Yes, it
like
still
there's
has
like
to
a
be good.
weird, you don't want to fool yourself. Like I wrote
Yeah.
this thing and nobody's reading it, but I think it's amazing. Well, it's still got to be good.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
you definitely wanna lean into, like, like, I love Tolkien and all that stuff, so what I'm writing is more high fantasy and I think if you looked at, like, the market, the traditional if you go to Barnes& and Noble or something, there's not a lot of, like, traditional high fantasy stuff,
Yeah.
but that's what I like to write, so it's that question of, can I take what I want to write and make it good enough that it doesn't really matter what the trend is, you know?
Yeah, and I think I definitely agree with the quality aspect. It absolutely it doesn't um like absolutely at the end of the day you want to publish something that you're proud of and that is good. Want, you know,
Mhm.
like that's and again I think that's why, you know, we're both saying that our the books we're writing have been taking a really, really long time. It's because it's never right yet. It's
Yeah.
never it's never yeah, that's what well, it's not it will be someday, I hope, but I'm
Mhm.
not putting that out until that's good. And that's why also I'm a big I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but I have no issue putting projects to the side. If like even I obviously you really, really persevere and don't put it to the side just because, oh, I'm not feeling it anymore. But for like
Mhm.
for example, that series those books I wrote before, I'm proud of them because, you know, I wrote them and I'm proud that teenage me could write these books, but objectively, they're not that good, you know?
Yeah.
So they stay for me as a, you know, trophy in a way, but no one has to read them. They're not that good. Um,
Mm.
so I have no problem sort of stepping away from something and being like, okay, like that was good for my development as a writer, but I can give the world something better.
Yeah, I'm totally not opposed. I have to having a couple projects going, and it's kind of what you were talking about. So I have the first book of my series. So long story short, the first manuscript I wrote, however long ago, that's back here that no one will ever read. That whole kind of concept has now become book 7 of the series that I'm wanting to write.
Amazing.
It
Beautiful.
just as I was working on it, I was like, this doesn't quite feel like the starting point. And then I just kind of went from there. But so I'm writing the first book, but I also started kind of a prequel novella, which
Beautiful.
when I started was more just like I was working on some things in the first book, but then I was struggling with some of like why things were happening. So I thought
Mhm.
I'd go just explore that for a minute to be like, try to just mostly to work it out in my own head. And sometimes it's easier to actually write it versus try to outline it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So, but then finally, not that long ago, I had some of it's on the computer, some's in a notebook, and then I kind of looked at it all and I was like, hey, this novella is actually like I'm pretty close. Like, if I kind of smushed it all together, it's actually kind of working. And so I'm hoping to finish that novella soon. And like I got a couple of scenes and chapters to plug in, and then obviously lots of editing. But it just kind of clicked all of a sudden where I looked at everything I had and was like, hey,
This I can
it
use
kind of
these.
works. Yeah. So
Uh, and I as I said, I'm a massive fantasy. I love fantasy, massive fantasy nerd. I just love those series, those books where it's like a world and you can like they've got all of these sort of yeah novellas, sub stories, all this. It's just it's exciting because once you fall in love with a world and a universe, it's so fun to just like keep going back and getting
mhm,
little snippets of it. So I love that. Yeah,
yeah,
high
I
fantasy.
think I was just thinking too about uh I think Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling writing those is probably one of the best examples of remaining authentic to what you want to do. Because I
Mm,
didn't that get turned down by like 27 publishers or something, like a ton of people. And so that's definitely a example of like she remained true to that vision of what she wanted that to be until she found someone
mm.
that would take it. And
Yeah,
now, that was like the biggest thing for still is.
yeah, and it's brought so many. I think it's brought so many people into reading. But yeah, that's exactly it. She wrote her and like the first Harry Potter is. I mean, obviously it's good. Like we're still reading it,
Mhm.
and it just like it exploded, right? But yeah, no, she's definitely a major sort of inspiration. Also in that not again coming back to that thing we were talking about before with rejections and not not letting that kind of like, retreat back into your little like sad writer corner and being like, oh no, I've just
Mhm.
failed as a creative. Like it's, yeah, like right,
Powering through.
powering through, write something you're proud of that, that is quality and
Mhm.
stick to it.
Yeah. So, a little pivot back to your works. So, is the book you're working on going to be part of a series? Is it kind of a standalone? Are you gonna create more in this world, or
So
where's it going?
this one I feel very much is a standalone. So originally it was supposed to be a duology, two books. But something that I just observed from the books I was reading is I think sometimes with duologies in particular or trilogies, sometimes sometimes it could have just been one. And so I was sort of
Mhm.
thinking about this my story and I was like, I think I can this story will be enough. Not enough, but I will say everything I need to say in one without having to
Yeah.
stretch it. So that's why at the beginning of this year, I started the whole process of. So this is when I started seriously plotting for the first time in my life. Um,
Mhm.
of okay, how would this look if I made it one book? And that meant I made a whole plan, drawing the things from the second book, rearranging everything, reshuffling, and so yeah, so now it's one book, but I'm leaving the ending in a way where I could revisit this world if I wanted to and
Mm.
revisit these characters if I wanted to. So that's how but it would be a whole new kind of adventure, I guess, whole
Yeah.
new plot. But so yeah, for now, one book and then who knows.
Yeah, I think it's smart of authors to not get too locked in on like the original thought. So, like what I was saying with mine, like I wrote it and then I realized it's not the beginning. So now it's, I eventually found the story that I wanted to tell, but it's much larger than I originally thought. Same with, this, you're like, hey, I think it's going to be a trilogy. Now maybe it's a duology. No, I think it's just one, staying true to like what the story needs to be as opposed to what you want to force it to be, kind of a thing.
And that's exactly it. Yeah, it's like I want to tell this story the best I can, and I actually think the best way for it is to be one. But I also love the idea of like I never throw anything out. It's like,
Hmm.
like you were saying this one that you kind of put to the side for a bit and then realize it actually fits, you know, deeper in the series. Like I never throw any idea piece of writing out. Because
Yeah.
you never know where that idea, that character is going to fit somewhere else. Like I've discarded characters from certain stories and then put them in a different one because
Hmm.
like this character I know still exists and needs to exist, but just maybe not and maybe they just fit in a different context or something like that. So I'm a bit of a hoarder when it comes to ideas. Nothing is actually
Yeah.
ever deleted.
I think it's great. I'm my real job is I do video production, video editing and stuff. And I never throw away any footage ever. So from any project, I keep it all because I've had people come back and need to use it. It's that same type of thing of like, you never know, just you might as well keep it. It's not going to hurt you.
And it may fit one day. Like
Yeah.
it may, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
That's really fun. So do you so this one you've planned to be now you've gotten down to be a single book. Then I'm assuming you obviously have your next one that you want to work on lined up?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I have my order of the next 20.
Yeah.
I know anyway, I hope I commit to getting through all of them. I do really want to. Um,
Mhm.
but I also each one is a very different genre.
Mhm.
I read a lot of genres, so I write a lot of genres.
Yeah, that's fun. I'm very different. I'm very opposite. I have this one world idea. I have a ton of ideas in that world, but like I don't have much desire to write other genres and stuff.
Branch
I'm
out.
kind of yeah, I have this kind of one thing I want to tell at the
Like
moment. Maybe
Tolkien.
it'll change, but yeah.
Like
Maybe it'll
Tolkien.
change someday, but
Yeah.
that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Well, you know, Tolkien, as we said, Tolkien's one of the greatest, and that was that was very much him.
Yeah, yeah, very fun. So we're getting kind of close here to being an hour. So why don't if you had maybe two, three, four pieces of advice for maybe a beginning writer or someone who's just started pushing through, what would you tell them about pushing through, continuing doing what they're doing, or just the writing process in general?
Is a very good question. I think, okay, I think for starters, I'll just start with something that I kind of struggled with a little bit, is like taking yourself seriously as a writer. It took me a really long time to tell people about my writing. Obviously, my closest friends knew because it's something that I've always done, so they know that I
Mhm.
write. But I would never ever admit that I wrote seriously. Like I like this isn't. It's not just like my little scribbles. Like this is what I
Yeah,
really want to pursue. And I think you do need to. It wasn't until I started taking myself seriously and kind of, telling myself like, no, 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 I want to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer, that I was able to start putting myself out there, sending things for submission. Like I would hold all of my writing so close, so close to myself.
mhm,
Even starting up that Instagram, I hate posting. I still hate posting, but I know it's something that ultimately is going to help me along this writing journey, and it has. Like I've had so many opportunities that I've found through even this. Like I've found you through Instagram. Like all of these connections, right? So
yeah,
you need to take yourself seriously before anyone else will. That's just how, because you can't. I think you kind of delusionally want some like publisher to be like, you, I have somehow stumbled across a
yeah.
notebook you left in a cafe, and now I
If
want
I
you.
just think it enough,
Yes.
eventually someone will just be like, "This one, they're a good writer." Yeah,
Exactly, right? We think we'll stumble into it, but you need to take yourself seriously before anyone else can. So I think that's one of my top tips. And yeah, I think also, you're never going to have time for writing. You have to make time for writing. And I think that was something that another reason why this has taken me so long is because I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm just busy right now with assessments. Like, once I finish assessments, and I'll refocus, or like, yeah, it's a bit like I would always kind of, if I wasn't particularly motivated in that moment, I would make excuses. Life is always busy, doesn't get less busy. You have to make time for it.
yeah.
And yeah,
There's always something, especially for something like writing that takes a long time, doesn't really have any kind of immediate effect on your life. Like
yeah,
it's not like you go to work and you make your hourly wage and you come home. It's like that's it. Like it doesn't do anything for your life in the moment.
yeah.
Those things can be so hard to make time for.
And sometimes I mean, this constant voice in the back of my head is often, what if you're just wasting all this time? Like you're waking up
Mhm.
so early, you could be, you could be sleeping in an extra hour or something. This could just be a waste of your life or something like that. But also,
Yeah.
it's never wasted. It
Right.
like it's never wasted. It's such good, you know, I don't know. It's such
Bet
good output.
better to waste your life trying to do something than waste it not trying to do something.
Ah, 100%. That was good.
Yeah.
That's like,
Thank you.
quote that.
Yeah.
But 100%, yeah, that's it. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I think those are my main two tips: is you're never gonna have time for it. You have to make time for it, and you need to take yourself seriously before anyone else can start
Yeah.
taking you seriously.
Yeah. I love what you say about taking yourself seriously. That's one I haven't heard as much that and I don't I think feel like I read this somewhere, but maybe it's in a book or I watched saw a video or something, but someone talking about like you have to assume the identity. Maybe oh, I remember. Have you read Atomic Habits by James Clear? Have you
I
read that
haven't.
book?
No, I've seen it.
It
I've seen it, but I haven't. Read it.
Super great read. Pretty short, you know, if you're into reading like self help and that kind of thing. But he talks about that in there of like, if you want to be someone who goes to the gym, you have to assume the identity of someone who goes to the gym before you, have reached all your goals and stuff. Same thing with being a writer. Like, you have to assume the identity of like, I am a writer, and you're going to write anyways. Whether
Yeah.
you are published or not published or have a book deal or whatever, you have to assume the identity of being a writer and write.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, that's it. It's you're not going to magically have a bestseller novel unless you unless you put in the work and,
Right.
you know, make that
Yeah,
happen. Yeah.
for sure. Well, this has been really great talking to you. Been super fun. We should definitely do it again sometime. Why don't
Yes,
you
please.
tell us where we can find you and all that stuff on socials and everything?
So at the moment, it's just my Instagram. My handle's at e.t.writer. I do have a website coming out soon, but I'm not a very tech savvy person, so it's taking me a lot of time. But soon I will have a website out there, and it'll also have like links to where you can find all the things that have been published. I have a. I'm just going to quickly plug. There's an anthology coming out soon, which I'm very excited to be part of.
Perfect.
It's called Dragon Dreams from Storm Dragon Publishing, and it's going to be super fun. So that's coming out
Nice.
like next month. But yeah, so that's me.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to link all that stuff below, and especially the anthology. We'll get that
Thank
in there
you.
so people can read some of your stuff. And
Thank you.
like I said, it's been super great. And whenever you get your book close to coming out, or whenever it's going to come out, or whatever, definitely let me know, and we'll have you back on.
Thank you so much. It has been a delight chatting. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So thanks everyone. This has been Writing Quest. This has been Emma Elias, and we're so grateful to have her. Thankful that she's been on the show, and we will see you next time.